The difference between being a really good, solid, successful college quarterback and being a successful, really good quarterback in the NFL, find it between the ears.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC, part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube or wherever you're going to download this podcast, it's always going to be free. I'm always going to appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can earn $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So the other day I was did you see the interview with Tom Brady that he did with Colin Cowherd? They did this ahead of the Super Bowl. Tom was talking about what made him the greatest quarterback to play in the NFL. He wasn't bragging, but again, if we are judging by jewelry, his 7 rings says it all. He wasn't bragging, but he was being asked, what separated him from the rest of the field. His answer was fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense. This is what he said. My magic superpower wasn't how fast I could run. It was how fast I could diagnose what they were doing. I could figure out what they were doing before they did it. I didn't snap the ball unless I knew my guys would be open. People aren't paying attention to the right thing. So right off the bat, when Tom Brady was talking about being fast, he wasn't talking about his 40 time. He definitely wasn't talking about, how hard or how far he could throw the football. Look, I do get it. Arm strength matters to an extent. But I'll take accuracy over the deep ball and being able to throw it 75 miles an hour every day and twice on Sunday if we're talking about being an NFL quarterback. And look, being able to use your legs, it's going to make a difference as well. Being able to, maintain and use the pocket to your advantage. You don't have to necessarily roll out and be able to run for yards, but it's pocket awareness, knowing when to step up, when to roll, those types of things. And that comes back to Tom Brady and using his brain to make him so successful in the NFL. His speed asset wasn't, again, being able to run for yards. It was processing a defense before the ball was even snapped. He looked at his brain as, it's the computer. How fast are we processing things? That's how I learned how to play the game. And this isn't just about Tom either. Tom Brady was explaining, what separated himself and Peyton and Eli Manning and Drew Brees from the rest of the group. Those guys all won Super Bowls, but no one would ever say that, hey, those dudes, they're all athletic freaks. None of them were. But coming out of high school, you can tell if a kid has a strong arm or if he can run around like, Mike Vick or Johnny Manziel. They have those types of abilities. Caleb Williams. I mean, those things jump off when you're looking at the film. But the reason people struggle in college, or we could just talk about life in general, it has everything to do with work ethic. Can we all agree on that? Look, if you have poor study habits in high school, trying to find and hone those skills in college, it's going to be challenging. Trust me. Personal experience, I know. And the same concept applies to a high school quarterback. Despite all that God-given athleticism, when you get to college, you have to start training your brain. You have to get your brain caught up to those physical attributes that you were born with, or you can see those physical results when you're in the weight room. You don't see what's happening upstairs. It's a feel. You see it on film. You see it after it's happened. So if you want to play at the highest level in the NFL, start studying film. That was Tom Brady's message. Don't wait till you get to the NFL. Start doing it in college. So that's the message that, I would say, convey to Jayden Maiava and Husan Longstreet. They've got the physical tools. No one's questioning that. What we need to find out is, do they have it between the ears? And that's the challenge. Quarterbacks in high school, they get by on their physical skills while they're learning how to read a defense. And we're not talking, when they're reading a defense in high school, we're not talking about, college and NFL reads. It's very simplified. It's more like, hey, go find your defensive key. Who's the guy you got to really focus on? And then you're just hoping that your teammates are seeing the same thing. They're on the same page. Remember, we're talking about 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Their brains just don't process that kind of information in that situation. They're focused on who's guarding me, who's in front of me. And then if you can get to that next step, it happens as you get older. So if you got a superstar sophomore wide receiver, I don't know how much of it is physical and how much of it is intellectual. In the NFL, it's about watching film, right? And the more film you watch, you understand tendencies. Something else that Tom Brady spoke about. He knew what a Tyrann Mathieu was going to do before Tyrann Mathieu did it. So for guys in college, I mean, watching film and then watching more film, understanding tendencies, that's advanced stuff. You got to be able to have the time. You got to be able to dedicate the time to doing that. When you're in college, allegedly, you're going to class also. So look, there are savants out there who just process the game faster and earlier than others. It's just natural. But those guys tend to be the exception and not the rule. So again, I was fascinated by what Tom Brady was talking about, and it made me think back to the quarterbacks at USC who had a lot of success in college, but not so much in the NFL. Guys like Matt Leinart, Mark Sanchez. Those are the first two names that popped into my head. Where does Sam Darnold fall on this spectrum? He had a fantastic 2024 season. Took the Vikings pretty far. I wouldn't say he was the reason why they lost their playoff game. But one of the drawbacks with Sam, and you saw it at USC a little bit, was, that gunslinger mentality, relying on the arm strength, relying on his legs to bail him out, that type of stuff. Matt Barkley had a nice career in the NFL, but he never turned into that guy. JT Daniels, okay, well, he didn't have a lot of success at USC, but he was supposed to be breaking down film when he was in elementary school. So what was the situation there? Was it injuries? Was it work ethic? Was that what held those guys back? Or, if we're talking about the NFL, was it the system they were drafted in? Did that play a part in their development or not developing? But what happened after that? Like I said, I brought up Matt Barkley. It's not like he was drafted to one team and that's where he stayed. Played for multiple teams. So again, I don't think anybody would say that Matt doesn't have good work ethic or that he's not dedicated or that he doesn't have all the physical tools necessary to be successful. So what was it? Here's another player. Where does Carson Palmer fall in all of this? It took him, his senior year at USC, won the Heisman, looked like he was going to be a consensus all-pro every year he played in the NFL. And injuries might have played a role with him. He never got to the Super Bowl, though. I know how dedicated Carson was to playing quarterback. I know this personally, just because of situation. Anyways, so it obviously everything doesn't fit nicely into a box. Tom Brady was just the guy who, you know what? He made it his that was his driving force. I'm going to be the smartest dude on the football field. I'm going to know the opponent's defense better than they know their own defense. And he talked about that. So what's missing with USC's quarterbacks lately? Is it are they able to process what's going on? Are they watching film? Are they remembering what they see on the film on game day? Is the playbook too difficult? Are they trusting their athleticism? What is it? But when you listen to Tom Brady, he said, do me a favor, watch the film, learn tendencies, know what the other team's going to do before they do it. Can you do that in college? I guess we're going to find out. We're going to find out a lot about how good of a coach Lincoln Riley is going to be in 2025. And in the next segment, Jen Cohen, she did a really nice interview with The Athletic. We're going to talk about some of that interview in the next segment. So let's do this. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's calorie smart, protein plus, or even keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab and go snacks just to keep you fueled all day long. If you have a hectic schedule like I do, the convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50off and use code LockedOnCollege50off. That's all one word. LockedOnCollege, the number's 50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50off at factorsmeal.com/LockedOnCollege50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. So I told you what Tom Brady had to say. What makes a great quarterback? Well, Jen Cohen, she did a really good, albeit lengthy interview. It was a Q&A session with Antonio Morales from The Athletic. Again, really good read. It's long, but it's informative. And I took a couple of sections from that interview that I wanted to kind of share, tell you what she said, and then I'm going to interject my take into it as well. So the first question we're going to talk about. Getting football back on track is one of the biggest things at USC right now. When you sat down with Lincoln Riley after the season, what were the priorities you felt needed to be addressed? Is what Jen said. And it was a pretty lengthy answer. I mean, our expectation is we deliver a championship level football program. We're not going to shy away from that standard here at USC. We think it's certainly what draws all of us to be here, the high level of expectations that we have. The conversation is really not just an end of season. They're kind of ongoing all the time. I say that because it's changing so rapidly. History's changing rapidly. This idea that there's this cyclical recap at the end of the year, it's just not even how it works anymore. It's constant and ongoing. There are definitely opportunities to sit down and develop a plan at the end of the season, which we did, but our conversations are continuous in figuring out what are the missing pieces and what can we put in place and how quickly can we ensure we get this program where it needs to be and where we expect it to be, end quote. So that was the first part of her answer. And based on the next portion, I would say recruiting was touched upon more than anything else. Look, there's no more reason for Coach Riley not to be successful when it comes to recruiting, getting the the guys he needs on his roster. So Jen Cohen continued. A huge priority for both Lincoln and I was to ensure he could focus on coaching the team and focus on football. His job as a head coach, like every head coach in college football, has changed so much, certainly since he's been here. But just in the last 6 months alone, that's how crazy things have evolved in our operations. We're both really clear and shared the understanding that he needed more support around him to focus on roster management, recruiting, evaluations, and how we're going to manage the budget and negotiations and all those things that are now part of college football's landscape that didn't exist a few years ago. So getting Chad Bowden hired as the GM, we really feel excited about him for both of us and being able to allow Chad to have the resources to build the infrastructure. Those are some of the main priorities we've been focusing on, and I think we've had a lot of positive momentum since the season ended, and we're going to keep building off of that. All right, so that's a mouthful. There's a lot to intake. The answer there is basically all Coach Riley has to do now is focus on coaching his team. That was my takeaway from that. At the same time, I'm still not completely buying into let's just let the genius coach. That's the new paradigm going forward. That's all a head coach in college should be focused on. Okay. It just seems like there's so many baked in excuses. And I'm not talking about Lincoln Riley, for head coaches in general. There's just so much going on now. Look, I get it. I really do. But it just seems like we're always trying to find the excuse for why a head coach wasn't successful. Sometimes they're just not a good head coach. It sounds like I'm ranting right now. I'm saving that for the third segment. So again, Lincoln Riley, focus on coaching. You've got Chad Bowden. He's got his support staff. You'll still be involved with recruiting, but that you don't have to worry about that anymore. Now you can spend more time game planning, working on all those things that happen on game day. So we'll see. Will it make a difference now? Another question. Based on what you've seen in the past year and a half, what are the football reasons you think Lincoln can get the program to where it needs to go? All right, interesting question. Jen had this to say. There are a number of things. One, he's done it before. He's led championship level programs before, so he has that experience. USC offers everything. I think the resources and the vision and all that are really aligned. The investments are there, and I feel like he has some really good people around him to help him and support him as the model and environment has adapted. That first part that I kind of inflected, it was dripping with Riley's answer when he was asked about Alex Grinch, about keeping him around for an extra year. He's done it before. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, there was just a little bit too much coach speak there, so to speak. But with that said, coaching at Oklahoma, he took over a program that Bob Stoops left him in really good shape. And yes, Oklahoma won the Big 12 conference. Yes, they made it to the playoffs, or the BCS and the 4-team and all that kind of stuff. But when you say he's done it before, he hasn't won anything yet, other than being really good coaching up quarterbacks and winning the Heisman. Is he going to be able to get USC back to that championship level that I think Jen was alluding to? He's got this year. He's got to take the next step. The schedule sets up well. Recruiting looks a lot better. And I know where I'm kind of focused on 2026 now. And that's when I think you're going to see the difference going forward with the benefits that Chad Bowden and the front office staff bring to the program. But I think the initial thing we're going to be looking for from Coach Riley is, all right, are you doing better with clock management? Have you adapted to the Big Ten conference better? Are you going back to your roots where you're running the ball and using your tight end? And are you doing that because you have the right personnel now, or because you're not focused on all that other stuff that's going on behind the scenes? Obviously, NIL, revenue sharing, that's not going to be on his plate anyways. It never really was, other than Coach Riley saying, yeah, you know what, we need that player, so let's make the best offer we can. Now he's not involved in any of that. You shouldn't be involved in any of that. If you got a general manager, let Chad take over those duties. We'll see what happens this season. What type of in-season evaluations is Jen Cohen making? But I encourage you, go read the whole article. Again, it's long, it's lengthy, but Antonio asked some really good questions, and Jen, I think, was pretty forthright. She gave a lot of the answers you anticipate hearing. But again, she's only been on the job for a year and a half at USC. So, she's still, I won't say getting her feet wet, but she's trying to get USC's athletic department, and it's not just football, she's trying to get the entire athletic department up to speed. One thing she does talk about is that football makes everything go. So yeah, it's going to get all of the attention, most of the attention. I will give this attention before we get into the next segment, Friday's Rant. USC women, they beat the number one team in the country. Yep, they beat the Bruins at Galen Center. So yeah, women's hoops. I guess that's the team to be watching. They beat number one UCLA. So we'll see where USC jumps up in the polls after this win. I would imagine they're going to be back in the top 5. We'll see if they jump over UCLA. That was their first loss of the year. So fight on to the women of Troy. All right, one more segment to go. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. You'll love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or you're picking a player to hit a clutch 3, you will never feel like you missed a chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you win, they pay you instantly, like that, like Thanos snapping his fingers. Right now, new FanDuel customers, you can bet $150 in bonus bets. And if your first $5 bet wins, you get $150. Let me read that again. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I like the moves that Jen Cohen has made during her year and a half in office at USC. There was one question that I wanted to save for this segment because it's going to get me off on a rant. It's going to get me going. This answer that she gave wasn't very comforting. This is one of the questions that Jen Cohen was talked about in the interview above. And I wasn't smiling after I read this particular answer. So the question was, Lincoln Riley has talked a lot about future non-conference scheduling. Everyone wants to know about the Notre Dame series. What's the outlook for that rivalry? Here's the answer. It's such an important series to our fans in both universities. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. In an ideal world, we're going to keep playing each other. With that being said, the landscape has changed dramatically. We're now playing in a conference where we fly back and forth across the country every other week. And the college football playoff expansion and how you get access to the college football playoff and how things are seeded and selected. Those, to me, are important unanswered questions. So we remain in conversations with Notre Dame about the series. I think we're clear to each other that we're going to continue to evaluate what's best, and it's my job to evaluate what's the best for our student athletes and our program. As we keep doing that, we're excited to go back to South Bend next year. I think she was talking about this year, 2025. Well, it's this year again, and USC travels to South Bend, Indiana in 2025. In 2026, Notre Dame comes back to LA. After that, I don't know. I believe that's where we are. We're in limbo after the 2026 season. Look, on those odd number years, let me just make it easy. Again, take control of the situation. In those odd number years, USC's powers that be, they need to make sure the Big Ten schedule fits USC's rivalry game. Okay? You don't have to worry about USC, UCLA. That game's in LA. It's a home game regardless, in theory. Make sure that USC gets their 7 home games, 5 road games in those seasons. All right? So the year that USC travels to Notre Dame, we know UCLA is at the Coliseum. That's just how it works out. Here's my concern. These next 2 seasons, they're going to determine if the rivalry ends up taking a sabbatical or not. You see in the rundown, I said, thank you, SEC. They might be that conference might be the guys that they might be the reason why this rivalry doesn't end. And what I mean by that is how much does strength of schedule get factored into the college football playoff committee's formula? I mean, ironically, thinking about this, the SEC, remember all the belly aching they were doing and the whining they were doing in 2024 because they didn't get as many teams in the playoffs as they thought their conference deserved? That might work to USC's advantage. We're talking about strength of schedule. That's what the SEC wants to say. Hey, we play the toughest schedule in conference, yada, yada, yada. Well, we know they got some bias built in there. We know the Big Ten conference schedule is actually more challenging. We both know, everybody who watches the show, if you don't know, the SEC and the big conference, they're trying to secure 4 guaranteed spots in every playoff field. If that happens, then I think the series is going to go on uninterrupted. Because again, you're now focused on strength of schedule. If the SEC is going to say, hey, we're playing all these guys in conference, all right, you want to really strengthen your argument? Drop the Citadel, drop Alabama State, Tennessee Tech, drop those teams from your out-of-conference schedules. Because when I heard that answer and the way the game has changed so much to the point that a head coach can't focus on recruiting all the time, and they have to be involved with game planning every moment that they're not doing recruiting or all the other stuff, it kind of just tells me that the college game is dead. And I don't like talking about it that way. It tells me that rivalries don't mean squat anymore, unless they're in conference. We know how USC fans feel about that. Notre Dame, then UCLA. And again, I really don't want to hear about how the student athletes are flying back and forth every other week. Just stop with that nonsense. What is the official age when that's not stressful? Look, I'm not coming down on Jen Cohen. That was when it comes to the USC Notre Dame rivalry, I need to hear her, see her. I need to see USC fighting hard to keep that going. You want to have 2 cupcakes on your out-of-conference schedule every year? Fine. Keep them in Division I. Give me the Missouri State. Give me the Georgia Southern games. Give me Notre Dame as well. I can't accept this whole, the schedules are too hard. They're flying too much. Stop it. It's not like these guys are flying on Spirit Airlines. They're comfortable. They're staying in nice hotels. And if they're training for the NFL, get used to it in college. And let's not pretend like, class and all their studies are stressing them out either. Do we even talk about the APR anymore? I mean, look, you don't even need to go through the transfer portal. If you want to change colleges, just unenroll, go to a different college. So again, I don't like hearing all these, and because of this and because of that, and we have to think about this and we have to factor in that. Jen Cohen is USC's athletic director. She was interviewed. She answered these questions, but her answers are no different than anybody else's. And just because they're all singing from the same book of hymns doesn't mean they're good answers. I like the fact that USC plays Notre Dame every single year, and that better not stop. And it better not be as a result of, well, we've got to make sure that we're getting the right seeding for the playoffs. How about making the playoffs and then worrying about the seeding? If you want to keep college football, you got to keep these traditions alive. And that includes those rivalry games. All right, I'm done ranting, done rambling, done with this episode, done with this week of Locked on USC. I'll be back next week with another 5 episodes. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.